The signal from beyond. The year is 2089, and humanity's foothold on Mars had never been stronger. The ISS Mars Observatory, humanity's most advanced space station, maintained its vigilant watch over the red planet, its massive array of sensors monitoring everything from weather patterns to seismic activity. But on this particular day, those sensors would pick up something that would change everything. Dr. Isabella Romano stood at her workstation, her dark eyes fixed on the quantum frequency scanner. The device had been picking up an anomalous signal for the past hour, something that defied conventional physics. As the station's lead quantum physicist, she had seen her share of strange phenomena, but this was different. "Commander Reeves," she called out, her voice steady despite her growing unease. "I think you need to see this." Commander James Reeves, a veteran of 3 Mars missions, made his way across the observation deck. His weathered face reflected the red glow of Mars below as he leaned over Isabella's console. "Talk to me, Doctor." "The signal, it's coming from coordinates that should be empty space. But look at these quantum signatures." She pulled up a holographic display, showing a complex wave pattern that pulsed with an almost organic rhythm. They matched the Helios research station. The name sent a chill through the command deck. The Helios had vanished 15 years ago during experimental quantum drive tests. The entire crew of 23 had been lost, leading to the suspension of the quantum propulsion program. Its disappearance had become legendary among spacefarers, a cautionary tale about pushing technology too far. "That's impossible," said Lieutenant Kira Patel, the station's communications officer. "The Helios was declared lost with all hands. There's nothing out there." But as if in response to her words, the main viewing screen flickered to life. Through the quantum static, a massive shape emerged from the darkness. The Helios, its hull scarred but intact, hung in space like a ghost ship risen from the depths. "All stations, report," Commander Reeves ordered, his military training taking over. "Get me visual confirmation and full sensor sweeps." Dr. Romano's fingers flew over her console. "Structure is intact, but these readings don't make sense. The quantum field around the ship is fluctuating. It's like it's phasing in and out of our reality." "Sir," Lieutenant Patel called out, her voice tense. "We're receiving a transmission. It's using Helios command codes. They're 15 years old but they're valid." Commander Reeves straightened, his jaw set. "Put it through." The voice that came through the speakers was distorted, broken by static and something else, something that made the hair on the back of Isabella's neck stand up. "This is Captain Richard Hayes of the Helios, to any receiving vessels. We've made breakthrough. The quantum drive, it worked. But something came through. Request immediate, containment protocols, time is breaking." The message dissolved into static, but its impact hung heavy in the air. Captain Hayes had been one of the pioneers of quantum propulsion theory. His loss had set the program back decades. "Sir," Dr. Romano said, her scientific curiosity warring with her instincts. "If they succeeded in creating a stable quantum field, the implications could be catastrophic," Commander Reeves finished. He turned to address the entire command deck. "Listen up. We're initiating first contact protocols with an assumed compromised vessel. Dr. Romano, assemble your team. Lieutenant Patel, notify Mars Control and request backup. Something brought that ship back after 15 years, and we need to find out what." As the crew sprang into action, Isabella couldn't shake the feeling that they were missing something crucial. The quantum readings from the Helios weren't just unusual, they were impossible. According to her instruments, parts of the ship were experiencing time at different rates. Some sections appeared to be moving backwards through time, while others seemed frozen in a single moment. "Commander," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "The quantum field, it's expanding. On the main screen, the space around the Helios seemed to ripple, like heat waves rising from hot pavement. The effect spread outward, distorting the stars beyond. Warning alarms began to sound throughout the observatory. "All hands, battle stations," Commander Reeves ordered. "Whatever's happening over there, we can't let it reach Mars. Dr. Romano, you have 1 hour to prepare for boarding. We need answers, and that ship is full of them." As Isabella rushed to gather her equipment, she couldn't help but wonder if they were making a terrible mistake. The laws of physics themselves seemed to be breaking down around the Helios, and they were about to walk right into the heart of it. But if Captain Hayes and his crew had somehow survived all these years, if they had truly achieved quantum breakthrough, the knowledge could revolutionize space travel. Or, she thought as she watched the quantum distortions grow stronger, it could tear reality apart. Echoes of the past. The boarding team assembled in the observatory's main airlock. Dr. Isabella Romano checked her quantum scanner one last time as Commander Reeves briefed the team. Alongside them stood Security Chief Marcus Wong, a former Mars colonial guard whose steady hands had saved lives during the Phobos mining crisis, and Dr. Yuri Vasiliev, the station's chief medical officer. "Remember," Commander Reeves said, his voice firm, "we go in, we find answers, and we get out. No heroics." He looked pointedly at Isabella. "Even if we find breakthrough quantum tech." The team donned their EVA suits, each equipped with enhanced sensors and emergency quantum shielding, experimental technology that had never been field-tested. As they crossed the connection bridge to the Helios, Isabella's sensors went haywire. "These readings," she muttered, adjusting her instruments. "The quantum field is stronger inside. Time itself is unstable." The airlock cycled, and they entered the Helios. Emergency lights cast a sickly blue glow through the corridors, creating shadows that seemed to move of their own accord. The air was thick with an electric charge that made their hair stand on end even inside their helmets. "Life support still functioning," Chief Wong reported, checking his suit readings. "But these energy signatures, they're all wrong." They made their way to the bridge, following the emergency lighting. The corridors were pristine, showing none of the wear 15 years in space should have caused. It was as if the ship had been frozen in time, or perhaps something worse. "Look at this," Dr. Vasiliev called out, his accent thickening with tension. He pointed to a coffee cup on a nearby console, its contents still steaming. "This was left recently. Minutes ago, not years." Isabella's quantum scanner pulsed urgently. "The temporal distortions are getting stronger. Some areas of the ship are experiencing time at different rates. That cup, it might have been left there 15 years ago, but for it, no time has passed." They reached the bridge, and Isabella's breath caught in her throat. The main viewport showed an impossible view, Mars as it had appeared 15 years ago, its colonies still under construction. But through the corners of the glass, she could see the present-day Mars they had just left. "Dear God," Commander Reeves whispered. The bridge wasn't empty. Captain Hayes sat in his command chair, but something was terribly wrong. He moved in stuttering motions, like a video playing at the wrong speed. One moment he appeared young, as he had 15 years ago, the next aged beyond recognition, then young again. "Captain Hayes?" Commander Reeves called out. Hayes's head snapped toward them, his face cycling through ages. "You came," he said, his voice echoing as if speaking from multiple times at once. "The experiment, we succeeded. Opened a door. But something came through." "What came through, Captain?" Isabella asked, her scientific curiosity overriding her fear. "Time itself," Hayes replied, his body blurring as temporal distortions wrapped around him. "We created quantum tunnel. Touched other dimension. But it touched back. Changed us. Changed everything." The ship groaned, metal twisting as quantum forces warped reality around them. Through the viewport, Isabella watched in horror as moments in time began to overlap. She saw the Helios's launch, its disappearance, its return, all happening simultaneously. The logs, Hayes gestured to a console, his movements leaving tracers in the air. Everything, documented. But careful, it's alive now. The quantum field gained consciousness. Wants to spread. Dr. Vasiliev's medical scanner beeped urgently. His cellular structure is in flux. He's experiencing multiple time streams simultaneously. It's killing him. Isabella reached the console, her fingers flying over the controls. The ship's logs appeared, documenting the Helios's quantum drive experiments. The final entry made her blood run cold. "Commander," she called out, her voice shaking. "They didn't just create a quantum tunnel. They created a tear in spacetime itself. And something came through, a quantum entity that exists in all time streams at once. It's been, feeding on the temporal energy, growing stronger." As if in response to her words, the quantum field intensified. Reality rippled around them like water, and through the distortions, Isabella saw something move. It wasn't physical, not really. It was a shifting mass of temporal energy, a being of pure quantum probability. "We need to leave," Chief Wong said, his weapon raised against an enemy he couldn't shoot. "Now." But Captain Hayes grabbed Isabella's arm, his touch sending temporal shockwaves through her suit. "Can't leave," he gasped. "Must contain it. The stasis field, in the lab. Others, still there. Trapped, in time. Save them, but don't let it out." The entity drew closer, its presence causing time to fracture around it. Through its shifting form, Isabella saw every possible timeline, every potential future and past, all happening at once. The sight threatened to shatter her sanity. "Fall back to the lab," Commander Reeves ordered. "We came for answers, and now we've got them. Time to find these survivors and figure out how to stop this thing before it reaches Mars." As they retreated from the bridge, Isabella looked back one last time. Captain Hayes had vanished, his body dispersed across time itself. On her scanner, the quantum entity's power continued to grow, feeding on the temporal energy it was creating. They had found the Helios, but their mission was far from over. Somewhere in the ship's labs, more of the crew waited in stasis, preserved in bubbles of frozen time. And between them and their goal lurked a consciousness born from the quantum realm itself, a being that threatened not just their lives, but the very fabric of reality. The entity. The corridor to the Helios's quantum lab twisted impossibly before them, stretching and contracting as temporal distortions warped the ship's architecture. Dr. Isabella Romano's quantum scanner had stopped giving readable measurements, the display now showed only cascading patterns of probability waves that made her eyes hurt. "The stasis chambers should be just ahead," Commander Reeves said, consulting a ship schematic that flickered between multiple versions of itself. "Assuming the lab is still where it's supposed to be. Time and space are becoming increasingly fluid," Isabella explained, watching as a nearby wall rippled like water. "The quantum entity is breaking down the barriers between time streams. Every moment that passes, it grows stronger." Chief Wong raised his hand for silence. Ahead of them, something moved in the shadows, not the entity itself, but something almost as disturbing. A crew member walked past an intersection, wearing an old Helios uniform. Then the same crew member walked past again, slightly older. And again, younger. And again, ancient and withered. "Temporal echoes," Isabella whispered. "The same person repeating across multiple timelines." Dr. Vasiliev's medical scanner chirped. "The quantum radiation is increasing. Our suits won't protect us much longer." They reached the lab's entrance, or what was left of it. The doors had been warped by quantum forces, twisted into a Mobius strip of metal that somehow still maintained an opening. Inside, the lab was a nightmare of temporal chaos. Equipment floated in zero gravity, then crashed to the floor, then floated again. Equations written on whiteboards solved themselves, erased themselves, rewrote themselves in endless loops. And there, along the far wall, stood 5 stasis pods, each surrounded by a bubble of stable spacetime. Life signs confirmed, Vasiliev reported. They're alive, perfectly preserved in quantum stasis. Isabella approached the nearest pod, wiping condensation from its window. Inside, a young woman in a researcher's uniform slept peacefully, untouched by the 15 years that had passed. The pod's display identified her as Dr. Nadia Volkov, lead quantum engineer. "We need to get them out," Commander Reeves decided. "Dr. Romano, can we safely deactivate the stasis fields?" Before Isabella could answer, the quantum entity made its presence known. The air between them crystallized into fragments of time, each shard reflecting a different moment in the lab's history. Through these temporal prisms, Isabella saw the entity take shape, a writhing mass of probability and potential, its form constantly shifting between what was, what is, and what could be. "It's here," Chief Wong warned, backing toward the stasis pods. "And it's not alone." From the temporal shards emerged grotesque figures, crew members caught in the entity's influence, their bodies twisted by quantum forces. They moved like broken puppets, existing in multiple states simultaneously, their flesh rippling with temporal distortions. "My God," Vasiliev breathed. "They're not dead. They're experiencing every possible death and life at once." The entity surged forward, and Isabella felt its consciousness brush against her mind. In that moment, she understood what they faced. It wasn't just a being of quantum energy, it was a predator that fed on possibility itself, consuming timelines and growing stronger with each reality it devoured. "The stasis pods," she shouted. "They're quantum shielding, we can use them to create a containment field." Commander Reeves nodded grimly. "Wong, Vasiliev, get those survivors out. Dr. Romano and I will handle the entity." Isabella's fingers flew over the stasis controls, rerouting power and reconfiguring the quantum shields. The entity seemed to realize their plan, its form coalescing into something more solid, more threatening. The twisted crew members shambled forward, their bodies flickering between states of life and death. "Commander," Wong called out, "we've got the first pod open." The entity struck, its touch shattering reality around them. Isabella saw infinite possibilities play out in microseconds, their success, their failure, their deaths, their survival, all happening at once. But through the quantum chaos, she focused on the task at hand. "Quantum shields at full power," she reported. "Reconfiguring to create a temporal prison." The entity screamed, a sound that existed across all frequencies and timelines simultaneously. It tried to retreat, but the quantum fields from the stasis pods began to contain it, forcing it into a single point in spacetime. "It's working," Isabella exulted, but her victory was short-lived. The entity, in its desperation, reached out with tendrils of pure probability. One of them touched Chief Wong, and he screamed as his timeline splintered. They watched in horror as he aged, de-aged, lived, died, all in the span of seconds. "Marcus!" Vasiliev rushed to help, but Commander Reeves held him back. "Complete the containment," Isabella shouted. "We can't let it escape." The quantum shields converged, creating a prison of frozen time around the entity. But as the field stabilized, Isabella realized their victory had come at a terrible cost. Chief Wong's body had collapsed into quantum uncertainty, his timeline too fractured to maintain coherence. The surviving stasis pod occupants were awake now, disoriented but alive. Dr. Volkov staggered forward, her eyes wide as she took in the changed lab and the temporal prison containing the entity. "What we created," she whispered, "what we let into our universe, it's beyond anything we imagined. Commander Reeves helped her stand. We need answers, Doctor. What exactly is that thing, and how do we stop it permanently? Dr. Volkov's face was grim. That's the problem, Commander. We didn't create it, we simply opened the door. And now that it's had a taste of our reality, it won't stop until it's consumed every possible timeline. Isabella watched the contained entity pulse within its temporal prison. They had won this battle, but she could feel reality growing thinner around them. The entity wasn't just trapped, it was waiting. And somehow, she knew their actions had only pushed them closer to an even greater catastrophe. Reality's edge. The quantum containment field hummed ominously as Dr. Isabella Romano and the survivors rushed to fortify the Helios's lab. Dr. Volkov worked alongside her, their fingers dancing across quantum control panels as they tried to maintain the temporal prison holding the entity. The containment won't last, Volkov warned, her voice tight with exhaustion. Every probability wave it absorbs makes it stronger. It's like trying to hold back an ocean with a paper dam. Commander Reeves paced the lab's perimeter, where reality itself seemed to be fraying at the edges. The other survivors, Dr. Takashi Yamamoto, quantum probability expert, Dr. Grace O'Neill, theoretical physicist, and two research assistants, twins Peter and Pavel Kozlov, worked to restore the lab's primary systems. We're receiving a transmission from the observatory, Dr. Vasiliev announced, his medical scanner now repurposed as a communications device. Lieutenant Patel reports quantum distortions are spreading. They're detecting temporal anomalies as far as Mars's orbit. Isabella's heart sank. It's already beginning. Even contained, the entity's influence is growing. Dr. Yamamoto looked up from his calculations, his face ashen. The math confirms it. The entity isn't just consuming time, it's unraveling the quantum foundations of space itself. If we don't stop it, the entire solar system will become a temporal dead zone. A violent tremor shook the lab, and for a moment, everyone existed in multiple states, sitting, standing, falling, all at once. Reality snapped back like a rubber band, leaving them gasping. The containment field is failing, Volkov announced. We need a more permanent solution. What about the quantum drive? Isabella asked. Could we use it to send the entity back where it came from? The drive. Volkov's eyes widened. Yes, but not to send it back. We could create a quantum singularity, a controlled collapse of all possible timelines into a single point. It would trap the entity in a closed loop of probability. And destroy it? Commander Reeves asked. No, Dr. O'Neill interjected, speaking for the first time since her revival. You can't destroy quantum probability itself. But we could contain it permanently, create a space where all possibilities exist simultaneously, but can never interact with our reality. Another tremor rocked the ship, stronger this time. Through the lab's viewport, they watched in horror as Mars flickered between different stages of its colonization, past, present, and possible futures bleeding together. The drive controls are in engineering, Volkov said. But the entity's influence is strongest there. Anyone who goes will experience every possible timeline simultaneously, Isabella finished. Like what happened to Chief Wong. Commander Reeves straightened. I'll go. No, Isabella countered. It has to be me. I understand the quantum mechanics involved. I can calibrate the drive while Dr. Volkov contains the entity here. It's suicide, Vasiliev protested. Everything's suicide, Isabella replied with a grim smile. In some timeline or another. The Kozlov twins approached with modified quantum shields. We've adapted these from the stasis pods, Peter explained. They'll buy you time, but not much. The moment you activate the drive, get out, Volkov instructed. The temporal collapse will start instantly. Isabella donned the shields, checking their charge. Through the containment field, she could feel the entity watching her, aware of her plan across all possible timelines. One more thing, Dr. O'Neill added. The quantum singularity, it won't just trap the entity. It'll erase every timeline where it broke through. The past 15 years will never have happened, Isabella realized. The Helios will vanish again, taking all evidence of the entity with it. But which timeline will become real? Vasiliev asked. All of them. None of them. The quantum probability will collapse into whatever reality has the highest chance of preventing the entity from breaking through in the first place. Commander Reeves placed a hand on Isabella's shoulder. We'll hold the containment as long as we can. Good luck, Doctor. Isabella stepped into the corridor, where reality had become a kaleidoscope of possibilities. She moved through fragments of time, passing versions of herself walking the same path in other timelines. Some succeeded. Some failed. Some never made it to engineering at all. Behind her, the entity pulsed against its prison, and Isabella felt its rage across all possible futures. It had waited an eternity in the quantum realm, searching for a way into normal spacetime. It wouldn't let go easily. As she approached engineering, the temporal distortions intensified. Equipment floated in zero gravity, then crashed down as artificial gravity fluctuated. Panels exploded in one timeline, remained intact in another. The quantum drive hung in the center of the chamber, a massive sphere of impossible technology that had torn a hole in reality itself. Isabella began the activation sequence, fighting against time itself as reality buckled around her. Through her quantum shields, she felt the weight of every possibility pressing down on her consciousness. She saw herself succeed. She saw herself fail. She saw herself never try at all. In the lab, the entity sensed her actions. The containment field began to crack. Quantum collapse. In engineering, Isabella's fingers flew across the quantum drive controls as reality fractured around her. The shields were failing, and with each passing moment, she experienced fragments of other timelines, success, failure, death, survival, all bleeding together in her mind. Through the quantum interference, her calm crackled. The containment field is critical, Dr. Volkov's voice warned. The entity, it's breaking free. Isabella forced herself to focus on a single timeline, fighting against the probability waves that threatened to tear her consciousness apart. The quantum drive hummed to life, its core beginning to pulse with temporal energy. Drive initialization at 60%, she reported, though she heard herself say different numbers across different timelines. In the lab, chaos erupted. The entity had sensed its approaching doom and lashed out with impossible force. The containment field shattered, releasing a storm of pure quantum probability into the ship. Commander Reeves and the others scrambled for cover as reality itself began to unravel. Isabella, Commander Reeves shouted through the comm, we can't hold it back anymore. Whatever you're going to do. His voice cut off as the entity surged through the ship. Isabella watched through security feeds that existed across multiple timelines as it consumed everything in its path. Crew members fractured into temporal echoes. Walls became quantum uncertainty. The very fabric of spacetime began to tear. 80%, Isabella announced to nobody in particular, fighting to keep her own timeline intact. The quantum shield sparked and died, leaving her exposed to the raw probability waves. The entity reached engineering, its form now massive, composed of countless possible realities. Through its shifting mass, Isabella saw every potential future, humanity's triumph, humanity's extinction, and everything in between. The entity had grown beyond mere consciousness. It had become a god of quantum probability. You can't stop what's coming, it spoke, its voice a chorus of infinite possibilities. I am every chance, every choice, every moment that could be. I am inevitability itself. Isabella smiled through the pain of experiencing multiple timelines. You're wrong, she said. You're just one possibility among many. And I choose a different one. She slammed the final sequence into the drive controls. The sphere at the center of engineering began to spin, faster and faster, tearing holes in reality itself. But these weren't holes leading out into the quantum realm, they were pulling everything in. What have you done? The entity's voice thundered across all possibilities. Created a quantum singularity, Isabella gasped, holding on to her consciousness as timeline after timeline collapsed around her. A point where all possibilities exist simultaneously, but can never escape. A prison of pure probability. The entity roared, its form beginning to distort as the singularity pulled at it. It tried to flee, to jump between timelines, but everywhere it turned, the quantum collapse followed. The holes in reality grew larger, consuming possibility after possibility. In the lab, Dr. Volkov watched her instruments in awe. It's working. The temporal anomalies are collapsing into the singularity. The entity made one final attempt to survive, reaching out with tendrils of quantum energy to seize Isabella. In that moment, she experienced every possible version of herself across infinite timelines. She saw the choice that led to this moment, and countless others that led away from it. Isabella. Commander Reeves's voice cut through the quantum chaos. You have to get out of there. The singularity is collapsing all timelines, she finished, though she wasn't sure which version of herself was speaking. Including this one. The entity's grip tightened, trying to drag her into quantum uncertainty with it. But Isabella held firm, focused on the one timeline she knew had to survive, the one where humanity never opened the door to the quantum realm. With the last of her strength, she initiated the final sequence. The quantum drive pulsed once, impossibly bright, and reality itself began to fold inward. The entity screamed across all possibilities as it was drawn into the singularity, taking with it every timeline where it had broken through. Isabella felt herself being pulled in as well, her own timeline becoming quantum uncertainty. But as the world dissolved around her, she saw something else, a new timeline crystallizing, one where the Helios never completed its quantum drive experiments, where the entity remained safely trapped in its own realm. As consciousness faded, she heard Commander Reeves's voice one last time. O'Neill was right. Reality is resetting to the highest probability of survival. The quantum singularity flared, consuming the Helios, its crew, and 15 years of fractured timelines. In the space of a moment that was simultaneously instant and eternal, everything changed. Mars Observatory, 2074. Lieutenant Kira Patel stared at her quantum frequency scanner, puzzled by an anomalous reading that had appeared for just a moment before vanishing. Something wrong? Commander Reeves asked, passing by her station. No, sir, she replied, shaking her head. Just a quantum echo. Probably a sensor glitch. As she adjusted the scanner's settings, she felt a strange sense of déjà vu, as if she had lived this moment before. But the feeling passed quickly, lost in the quantum probability of what might have been. In the void near Mars, space-time rippled slightly as the last echo of Isabella Romano's sacrifice rippled across reality. The entity remained safely trapped in its quantum realm, and the timeline where it broke through became nothing more than a possibility that never was. But somewhere, in the quantum probability of what might have been, Dr. Isabella Romano smiled, knowing she had chosen the right timeline after all.